If you thought BTS coming back together was already one of the biggest music stories of 2026, the latest ARIRANG numbers are about to make this comeback look even more incredible. According to Billboard box score figures, BTS has reportedly generated $433.2 million in gross revenue and sold approximately 2.3 million tickets across 38 sold-out shows as of mid-August 2026. That is a massive achievement on its own, but the real headline is what those numbers mean for the global K-pop industry. BTS has now moved beyond the reported $331.8 million gross from BLACKPINK's Born Pink, one of the most important touring benchmarks K-pop had established. That puts ARIRANG roughly $101 million above that benchmark, and suddenly the conversation is no longer about whether K-pop can compete on the world's biggest stages. The question is how far the biggest K-pop acts can push the limits from here. And BTS is doing it with a full-scale stadium tour supporting the album ARIRANG, making this one of the most ambitious comeback runs of the group's career. What makes the story even more impressive is that BTS did not return to a music industry that had been standing still. The K-pop scene continued to grow, new groups became global stars, streaming habits evolved, and social media completely changed how fans discover music. Yet when all 7 BTS members returned together, the demand was still enormous. In fact, the numbers suggest that the demand was waiting for them. This is not an ordinary concert tour. To understand the scale of ARIRANG, forget the follower counts and streaming numbers for a moment and look at the buildings BTS is filling. This tour is built around stadium-level performances, with venues capable of accommodating tens of thousands of fans in a single night. That makes the challenge completely different from selling out an arena. A stadium requires an enormous audience, sophisticated logistics, huge production infrastructure, and enough demand to convince fans to travel from other cities, states, and even countries. BTS has been doing exactly that across North America. The North American portion has stretched across major American and Canadian markets, with stadium shows forming the backbone of the run. And the box office results from individual cities show just how much demand exists beyond the headline $433.2 million figure. The first major North American statement came from Tampa, Florida. Tampa, the North American opening statement. BTS brought ARIRANG to Raymond James Stadium for 3 performances on April 25, April 26, and April 28. Across those 3 shows, reported box office data puts attendance at approximately 194,335 tickets, with a gross of around $40.7 million. That means nearly 200,000 people packed into one stadium across 3 nights to see BTS return to North America. And the third Tampa show is especially important because it was added after the initial demand demonstrated just how strong the market was. That is a recurring theme throughout ARIRANG. BTS announces a stadium, fans respond, additional demand appears, and the tour keeps expanding its footprint. Tampa was not just an opening stop. It was an early warning of what was coming. El Paso kept the momentum moving. From Florida, BTS moved to El Paso, Texas, where ARIRANG took over the Sun Bowl for 2 performances on May 2 and May 3. The reported figures are once again substantial, with roughly 97,700 tickets sold and about $20 million in gross revenue across the 2 shows. Add Tampa and El Paso together, and those 4 performances alone represent approximately $60 million in reported gross revenue. And remember, this was still early in the North American journey. BTS had not reached some of its biggest markets yet. Stanford delivered another massive stadium run. Next came California. BTS performed 3 shows at Stanford Stadium on May 16, May 17, and May 19. The reported attendance was approximately 152,000 people, while the gross was around $30.5 million. At this point, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. BTS enters a major market, the stadium fills, the shows sell out, and the financial numbers immediately become significant. That is the difference between having an artist who is popular online and having an artist with genuine global touring power. A song can become a viral sensation overnight. A stadium cannot. To fill tens of thousands of seats, people have to make an actual commitment. They have to buy the ticket, plan the trip, show up, and decide that the live experience is worth the money. Millions of people have made that decision for BTS. Then Las Vegas went to another level. If one North American stop captures the scale of ARIRANG particularly well, it is Las Vegas. BTS performed 4 shows at Allegiant Stadium on May 23, May 24, May 27, and May 28. The reported box office numbers put the 4-show run at approximately 245,820 tickets sold and $49.5 million in gross revenue. Nearly 250,000 tickets. Almost $50 million. One stadium. 4 performances. That is an enormous live entertainment operation, regardless of genre. And Las Vegas is not exactly a market where entertainment options are limited. The city is packed with concerts, sports, major events, hotels, shows, and tourist attractions competing for attention. Yet BTS turned its Las Vegas performances into an army destination. That is one of the clearest examples of how a BTS concert can become much bigger than the 2 or 3 hours spent inside the stadium. Then the second North American wave arrived. But ARIRANG was nowhere near finished. The tour returned to North America for another major sequence of stadium performances beginning in August. The schedule moved through some of the biggest sports and entertainment markets in the United States. BTS performed at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, near New York, on August 1 and 2. Then the tour moved to Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, for August 5 and 6. Baltimore followed with 2 shows at M&T Bank Stadium on August 10 and 11. The tour then headed to AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, for August 15 and 16. After that, BTS crossed the border into Canada for 2 performances at Rogers Stadium in Toronto on August 22 and 23. Toronto was particularly significant because it marked BTS' return to the Canadian stage after an 8-year gap, and both performances sold out. By this point, calling ARIRANG simply a comeback tour was starting to feel like an understatement. It had become a full-scale stadium phenomenon. Chicago and Los Angeles keep the pressure on. The momentum continues with Chicago's Soldier Field, where BTS is performing August 27 and 28. And then comes one of the biggest North American stops of the entire run, SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California. BTS is scheduled for 4 Los Angeles area performances on September 1, September 2, September 5, and September 6. 4 stadium nights in Los Angeles is a major statement. Los Angeles is one of the most competitive entertainment markets anywhere in the world. It is the center of Hollywood, home to major sports franchises, and a regular destination for the biggest touring artists on the planet. So when BTS commits to 4 stadium dates in LA, it is not simply another line on a tour schedule. It is a major event. And by the time the group reaches Los Angeles, ARIRANG will have already crossed through a remarkable collection of American markets. But why are these numbers so important? At first glance, $433.2 million might simply look like a gigantic amount of money. But touring revenue tells us something deeper. It measures how strongly an audience is willing to convert fandom into real-world action. Streaming a song costs very little compared with traveling to a stadium. Watching a music video takes minutes. Going to a concert can require buying a ticket, traveling hundreds of miles, booking a hotel, taking time off work or school, and coordinating an entire weekend around the event. That is why 2.3 million tickets sold is such a powerful number. Those are not just digital clicks. They represent millions of people physically showing up. For BTS, that means the connection with the audience survived years without a full group tour. The members were away. The industry changed. New artists emerged. But when BTS returned as 7, millions of fans were ready. That is an extraordinary level of loyalty. And then there is the BLACKPINK benchmark. Now we have to talk about the comparison that will inevitably get everyone's attention. BLACKPINK's Born Pink generated a reported $331.8 million, establishing one of the biggest touring benchmarks in K-pop. ARIRANG's reported $433.2 million has now moved beyond that figure by roughly $101 million. But this should not become another pointless BTS versus BLACKPINK fan war. That misses the entire point. BLACKPINK's Born Pink was historic because it showed how powerful a K-pop girl group could be on the global stadium stage. BTS pushing beyond that benchmark does not erase what BLACKPINK accomplished. Instead, both achievements tell us something much more exciting. The global K-pop market has become powerful enough for multiple artists to create enormous stadium tours. And that matters for every K-pop fan. Because when one superstar raises the ceiling, the next generation gets a bigger target. Today's record becomes tomorrow's goal. That is how an industry evolves. The stadium production is a whole different beast. There is another part of ARIRANG that should not be overlooked, the production. You cannot put tens of thousands of people inside a stadium and expect a simple stage with a microphone to carry the entire show. A stadium performance has to be designed to reach people sitting incredibly far from the main stage. That means enormous video screens, powerful lighting systems, massive sound reinforcement, complex camera operations, choreography that reads clearly from a distance, visual effects, stage movements, and carefully coordinated production teams working behind the scenes. Think about the logistics for a moment. Thousands of fans arrive within a short period. Security teams manage the crowd. Production crews operate the stage. Lighting and video departments synchronize with the performers. Merchandise teams handle huge demand. Transportation systems deal with a sudden wave of people entering and leaving the area. And then BTS has to walk onto that enormous stage and make someone sitting near the top of the stadium feel like they are part of the same experience as someone standing much closer to the members. That is the challenge of stadium entertainment. The show has to feel massive without losing the emotional connection between performer and fan. ARIRANG is bigger than a tour. There is also a cultural dimension to this era. The name ARIRANG connects BTS' modern global identity with one of Korea's most recognizable traditional songs. That gives the project an interesting contrast. On one side, you have one of the biggest pop groups on earth performing for enormous international audiences. On the other, you have a name deeply connected to Korean cultural heritage. The result is a tour that represents something bigger than music alone. Korean language is being heard throughout massive American stadiums. Korean cultural references are being presented to international audiences. Fans from completely different backgrounds are gathering together around the same artists. And social media allows those stadium moments to travel around the world almost instantly. That is one of the reasons K-pop's global rise is so fascinating. The audience does not have to become Korean to connect with Korean music. They simply have to connect with the emotion. And ARMY is a major part of this story. You cannot explain ARIRANG without talking about ARMY. Because BTS created the music, but the fandom has helped turn that music into a global community. Fans travel across cities and countries to attend shows. They organize projects. They create videos and fan content. They share performances. They introduce new listeners to BTS. And they turn concert weekends into major events. That means the impact of a BTS stadium show does not necessarily end when the final song finishes. Fans stay in hotels. They eat at restaurants. They use local transportation. They buy merchandise. They visit other attractions. They post their experiences online. A stadium concert can therefore become an economic and cultural event for the entire city. Las Vegas, Toronto, Los Angeles, New York area markets, and other major destinations are not simply hosting a concert. They are hosting thousands of visitors who have traveled specifically because BTS is there. This is what makes the comeback so interesting. There is an important detail that sometimes gets lost when people talk about BTS success. The group did not return to the exact same K-pop landscape they left. The industry had changed dramatically. New groups had built enormous international audiences. Short-form video had become even more powerful. Streaming had evolved. K-pop had become even more integrated into American pop culture. And younger fans had discovered artists who did not exist during BTS' earliest years. Yet BTS returned and immediately generated stadium-level demand. That is difficult to reproduce. Being famous is one thing. Being able to disappear for years as a full group, return together, and still sell millions of tickets is something else entirely. ARIRANG is proving that BTS audience is not simply large. It is deeply committed. The $433.2 million number is not necessarily the finish line. And now we reach the part that could make this story even crazier. The reported $433.2 million figure is a snapshot of the tour's performance as of mid-August 2026. It should not automatically be treated as the final total for the entire 2026 to 2027 run. The tour is still continuing, which means additional performances can add more tickets, more revenue, and potentially another layer of records. So the big question is no longer whether ARIRANG is already one of the biggest K-pop tours ever. The numbers have made that clear. The question is where the final number will land. Could ARIRANG eventually cross the $500 million mark? How high can the attendance climb beyond 2.3 million? And when the complete tour is finally finished, will another K-pop artist have to chase a completely new benchmark? Those are the questions worth watching. BTS came back with something to prove. The simplest headline is that BTS is back. But ARIRANG suggests something more powerful. They came back to a changed music industry and immediately proved that their global audience had not disappeared. They came back with a new album. They came back with a stadium tour. They came back to millions of fans who had spent years waiting to see all 7 members together again. And then they turned that anticipation into hundreds of millions of dollars in touring revenue and millions of tickets sold. That is why ARIRANG is more than another concert cycle. It is a snapshot of how far K-pop has traveled. There was a time when Korean pop music was often treated by Western media as a niche international phenomenon. Now we are talking about Korean artists selling out some of America's biggest stadiums and generating touring numbers that compete with the biggest names in global entertainment. The industry has changed. The audience has changed. And the definition of a global pop star has changed with it. The final take. So, what does the ARIRANG World Tour actually prove? It proves that BTS still has extraordinary pulling power. It proves that millions of fans are willing to travel and spend real money to experience the group live. It proves that stadium-scale K-pop is no longer some futuristic idea. It is happening right now. And it proves that the ceiling for Korean artists on the global stage keeps moving higher. As of mid-August 2026, the reported numbers are already staggering: $433.2 million in gross revenue, approximately 2.3 million tickets sold, and 38 sold-out shows. And that is before the entire 2026 to 2027 tour has finished. So forget the fan wars for a second. Forget the endless arguments about which group is bigger. Look at the bigger picture. BLACKPINK helped push K-pop's touring power forward with Born Pink. BTS has now pushed another major benchmark even higher with ARIRANG. And the next generation of K-pop artists gets to inherit that bigger stage. That is the real win. Because the story is no longer about whether K-pop belongs in the global music conversation. K-pop is already in that conversation. The question now is how many more records these artists are going to break. And BTS has once again made the answer very interesting. If you are ARMY, tell me in the comments where you think the final ARIRANG World Tour gross will land when the entire 2026 to 2027 run is finished. Do you think BTS can push beyond $500 million? And if you are watching this as a K-pop fan, what group do you think could be next to challenge the record? Subscribe for more K-pop updates, touring numbers, records, and the stories behind the biggest moments in the industry. Because ARIRANG is still moving. And BTS is still writing the story.